Oi, wie lang wird bleiben, noch schlafen und tragen die schändliche Keit? Wie lang wird glänzende Reichtümer schaffen, vor dem, was bereut euer Breit? Wie lang wird glänzende Reichtümer schaffen, vor dem, was bereut euer Breit? Wie lang wird stehen, Rückens gebeugen, gerniedert, heimlos verschmacht? Es tont schon wach auf und sie öffnet die Augen, der viel Eiserne Mann.
When Ferry Street became a place for immigrants to move to, what kinds of people moved there?
At that time, taken between 1900 and 1920, there was thousands and thousands of Jews leaving Russia, coming to America. A lot of them stayed in New York. Some stayed in Hartford. A few of them got up to Springfield. Less than a few got up to Amherst. That was what was happening. So it kind of dwindled down as it got into the suburbs of these big cities. And most of them became peddlers or worked in garment industries. We had a lot of garment industries in Springfield.
She can tell you about her family because they are involved with the history of Springfield. Sarah's a daughter of a pioneer.
Now, when you say her family's pioneers, what do you mean?
Well, they came over in 1905. They were in Springfield in 1905.
It was before a lot of organizations, so that families helped each other.
Their groups were Orthodox, and they were going to the areas like the Congress Street Shul, the Russian Shul, and the Beth Israel. Those three shuls absorbed them.
I was raised right here in Springfield. My parents came to Springfield in 1905, and my father was brought here by Rabbi Rappaport, who was the chief rabbi at that time, to be a chazan and a shechet at the Beth Israel Synagogue, which is then on Grays Avenue. And my family's lived here ever since. Whoever knew him in those early days said that he was a very talented chazan, shechet, mol. He was known as the Yankee Clipper up and down the Connecticut Valley, because they would come to pick him up from the small towns, and they all knew him. As a matter of fact, when I was born, my mother told me that he was at a bris, and he wasn't home.
Our family ultimately became very prominent in the community, and we're successful people here.
And it all began with Grays Avenue.
Well, I had two of the most wonderful parents in the world. My mother, her name was Sadie Broad, and it's a very large Broad family in this area, or at least settled here in this community. And she came to this country at age 14 by herself, and she came to her uncle Benjamin Berg, who was a pioneer in Springfield and a man that was a most remarkable man. He was a poet, he was a writer, he was a businessman, but he was one of the first settlers in Springfield. Everybody who came to Springfield came to Benjamin Berg, and she came to him.
Let me talk to you first about how they came here. They had a rabbi who was from their town who came to this Springfield, Rabbi Rappaport. And Rabbi Rappaport wrote back to my father and said, the grandfather said, Yitzchok, there's a Jewish colony here in Springfield. They don't have a Hebrew teacher, and it's going to grow, and we suggest that you come here and be the Hebrew teacher for the town. Start it. Well, they couldn't speak English. It was a tough time. And what did you do in those days? You became a peddler. You could only show the products sell them and didn't have to talk. Well, my father did that. In the meantime, they were sending pennies and nickels and dimes to save to get the rest of the family over. And a few years later, they had accumulated a few $100s, and they brought over the rest of my grandmother, the 4 other girls, and the younger son.
What did your father do for a living? His name was?
Nathan Frankel.
Frankel.
And he was a peddler.
A peddler.
Women's clothing. That's how we started out. I'm 94, 96 years ago. My father started out that way.
And he was peddling around Springfield?
He went around with a pack on his back, and then he opened a ladies' store in the north end of Springfield, which would be 96 years old today.
Where was that store and what was it called?
Frankel's.
And what street was it on?
Main Street.
In the north end.
Oh, when my father started out as a peddler, one of his customers was Catherine Grodsky. And I wound up marrying her son. He lived on Whittier Street, and I lived on Prospect Street, and I went to Cheston Street Junior High. And after that, yeah, he went to Tech, and I went to Central up on State Street, and used to carry my books down the hill. We were childhood sweethearts.
I'm trying to remember some of the stores that were in that area. There were so many of them on the north, and I'd say that 90% of them were Jewish. And on the other side, on this side, the southern side of the arch, there were stores and stores and stores of women's clothing and men's and shoes and everything, and most of them were owned by Jews or run by Jews.
Oh, Ferry Street ran from Main Street to Dwight Street, and it was, if you will, the Jewish center, shopping center of Springfield.
You could go on Ferry Street on Friday or Saturday and see everybody in the city there, in the bakery or in the deli. My father had a very small store on one corner and sold yardage only to peddlers, or anyone that came in actually, but mostly peddlers. Then he moved across the street and he had Bilski's department store.
There was a Bilski's department store on opposite Ferry Street. In other words, it was on Dwight Street, facing, when you came to the end of Ferry Street onto Dwight Street, there was Bilski's.
And it was one of the first discounts. It was the first discount store in the city. And he used to. Well, I don't know about that.
In the 20s, the Jewish shopping, to a great extent, was on Ferry Street, which no longer exists. And that became a casualty of urban renewal.
And it was a real Jewish neighborhood.
Very Jewish neighborhood, yeah. You went on Yontif, everybody was dressed in Yontif clothes, and the kids would walk from one shul to the other, to see each other. It was very, very nice.
And the butchers, were they Romanian, Russian? Where were they from?
Iberal.
Uberall.
There was Brown's, from whom my mother always bought.
Why would you go to one butcher over another one?
Why? Because Mr. Brown came from the same shtetl that my mother came from.
Which was?
She came from a small town in Lithuania called Aran.
Did they know each other in the old country?
Yes,
They did.
they did. So we had, in Springfield at one time, there were like 7 kosher butchers. Only one true fish market. That was Mr. Rantile's. After World War II, on the right-hand side of the street, Benny's Delicatessen opened up. Benny's initially was on Main Street near the Arch.
Every Saturday, people were there buying deli.
Saturday night after Shabbos, and Friday before Shabbos.
Right. Yeah. And
So
Schneier's Deli was the best in the city. His corned
Would
beef was
non-Jews come
great.
over there also?
Oh, yes.
They would.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. You had a
yes,
lot of non-Jewish
yes,
customers.
yes.
I don't believe it was any wider than this room. And it was a beautifully kept store. He sold deli, and then he also had a couple of tables. But that was the extent. Benny's, on the other hand, was a regular delicatessen where you went in to eat. I go by to go to Main Street to get the trolley. I would pass by Benny's, and he had a pan of baked beans, and on the other side were hot dogs on the griddle. And I would look in there,
And tell me about magaziners.
a magaziner in there, the window. They had cupcakes, and they had
Oh, those cupcakes, how we used to drool.
On Dwight Street, there was a Penn's travel agency. He loaned money to the Jewish people. He would arrange to contact people overseas for family, you know. That's what he did, besides travel. There
So
was
if you wanted
Russia.
to bring someone out of France or Germany
He would
or
help.
Russia, he would make the
He would
arrangements.
help. Yeah. Further down Dwight Street, there was a grocery store called Barney's, where you could go in and get a herring out of the barrel and a pickle out of the barrel, and it was everybody used to shop there in the North End.
And there was a big grocery store where everybody would meet. And they had a big barrel of pickles out in front. It was just like you read about it in the east side of New York. That store was there. And everyone met there. Everyone exchanged greetings there. That was the meeting place in the North End.
Going further down Dwight Street, when you come to Essex Street, there was the chicken place, the kosher chickens, where you could go in, get a live chicken, they kill it, and pull the feathers out for you. And one place, and one of the owners was Mrs. Zandon. That was closer to Dwight Street. Then there was another one further down the street that was owned by somebody else, but also kosher chickens.
Chicken we got from the chicken dealer.
Oh, separate dealer was a chicken.
Separate, of course. On 10th Street, there was Zandon's Poultry. Go in there, they'd shuck the chicken for you. You pick out your own chicken. They had their own shechet, and you'd pluck your chicken. If you didn't want to pluck it, you'd pay 10 cents extra, and they had an elderly woman there pluck it for you.
At that time, when I came to Springfield, there were 8 rabbis that were shachtim. They shachted the chickens and stuff. 8.
8.
And every chicken market had a shechet.
You actually had chicken markets
Oh, yeah.
attached to the butcher shops, I guess.
Yeah, there were no frozen chickens in the world then. If you wanted a chicken for Shabbos, you went to the chicken market. You picked out a chicken, the sheikh had shechted it for you, and the workers there plucked the feathers. You had to go home and open the chicken and kasher it with salt to kasher it to make it kosher. And the same thing with the meat. You bought meat, you had to go home and kasher it. It's a different world today.
What's your memory of the Rosh Hashanah?
The Rosh Hashanah was a very warm place to daven. The whole shul was just a warm feeling.
So on Shabbos, your husband would walk over here and you'd stay home.
My husband walked. No, at that point there was a shul. At that time there was two Orthodox shuls downtown in Springfield, one on Chestnut Street and one on Dwight Street.
Right.
And we used to go to the shul on Dwight Street. There was a
What do you
shul.
remember of that shul?
There was also a very nice shul. There was a lot of people used to come all the time, and everybody lived within easy walking distance from there. You know, as a young married woman, it seemed like there was a lot of women all the time. I mean, a lot of people there all the time, and you knew everybody because everybody was a neighbor of yours, whether to the right or the left or across the street. But everybody knew each other, and then there was another shul on the next street over. So it was like one happy family.
About 1932 or 33, my father, he became a member of Kesser Israel. Now, Kesser Israel at that time was located on the corner of Chestnut and Franklin. It was a converted mansion. The main sanctuary, if you want to call it, was where the men sat, was on the ground floor, and then they had a balcony, and that was for the women. I think it must have held, between men and women, it could have held about 250 people, 200 people possibly.
Then they decided they wanted to start building a show. So around 1924, I think. By this time we had enough Jews in Forest Park to feel that we could run a show. So we bought this property on Oakland Street. We'll go back to the first Kadima. Well, when that was built, I remember the place became so crowded that on holidays there was no place to sit. The women were upstairs, and downstairs the men were crowded. It was jammed. And we had more members than we could handle. We even used the downstairs. It used to be the show before we built the upper part for holiday services. And downstairs, we let the men and women sit together.
We lived on Sumner Terrace, which is directly the next street to where the Kadima Center ultimately set up. And we were great tennis players because the tennis courts were directly across the street. But at an early stage, whenever there wasn't a minion in Shul, the Shamish used to come over to Forest Park and pull us off the course. We were practically living on the course because it was right across the street from where we lived. So that at an early age, I really became pretty proficient, not only at making a minion, but I knew a lot than most kids did about davening because I was there all the time.
You'd be wearing your tennis outfit, they take you
I'd
right
go
into
right
shul.
to the shul, right to the shul.
Can we go back for a moment to the north end?
Right.
Can you recall urban renewal when it came?
Yes,
Can
it came
you-
in the 60s.
No
There
doubt.
were only 2 Jewish synagogues affected. Beth Israel was not affected. The Sons of Israel, which was then on the corner of, practically on the corner of Jefferson Avenue and...
Between Bancroft.
Between Bancroft, on White Street, between Bancroft and Jefferson Avenue, was not affected. There were only 2 Jewish... And at that time, the Jewish community was disappearing. The Jewish had moved to the park, and from the park it was moving to
Well,
Long Island.
also, Harry, they moved up closer to the Shriners Hospital in
Yeah,
that area,
yeah.
Narragansett Street. So there was a nucleus of Jews there.
But the trend was downward.
It was already happening.
It was already happening.
We called them the Oleitikus, the ones who were able to move to Forest Park.
But actually, by 65, when in the 60s, the trend was definitely down.
So can you tell me, at some point, the kosher establishments started disappearing?
After the kosher butchers started to leave,
That's
closed
right.
down.
King had the Crown Market for a little while, and even they disappeared. They were on the corner of Fort Pleasant Avenue and Fort Pleasant and Sumner. Nice, beautiful Jewish market. Everything Jewish. Kosher meat, everything.
Why did they leave? Well, the people became more affluent and they moved into the park, and the old people went to go to heaven. And the children didn't stay in the North End. They moved on.
The younger people aren't living here anymore. They're all going all over the world. Our family is typical.
When the children grew up in Springfield, they went to college. And they got a taste of the larger cities, the larger communities, so they don't come back to Springfield. There's no continuation of the families here.
We still recognize that we're Jews.
Yeah.
But in today's society, it's a different living style. But again, we're spread so far apart, we've lost our roots.
No, the Lubavitch always says it. positive outlook on everything. You don't count people by numbers, you count people by the good deeds they do. And the city itself is very coherent. When the Federation calls a general meeting, the whole city comes. The whole city comes and takes part. I want to thank you very much for calling me down and taking an interest in the Jewish life of this community. If you know the background, you know where we descended from, then you know how to go forward in a great way, in a good way, in a happy way, in a successful way.
Mein Städtele Welt, meine Heimele wie ich hab meine kindrische Jür verbracht. Sind ihr amul gewesen in Welt, meine Heimele Welt, meine Heimele wie ich hab mit die Kinderle dort gelacht. Jeden Schabes pfleg ich laufen dort mit dem chemisch Kleid. Sitzen hinter dem kleinen Beim alle lernen bei dem Tag. Welt, mein Städtele Welt, meine Heimele wie ich hab gehabt, die schöne Chaloimes Assad.